look at the relationship with their inner circle, whether it's family, close friends, sisterhood, all that stuff, and also to explore their relationship to whiteness, their relationship to racism, and how that has an impact on how they show up in the world, how they love, how they parent. So there's so many, I know that's a huge topic, but that's kind of like in a nutshell giving you an idea of how I like to work with clients. But yeah, using that triangle, the empowerment triangle as I call it, is a really important part of the healing process. So yes, that's just a little bit about me. So let's get into the content. So how does the mother wound, how does it show up at work? Okay, so the first thing is perfectionism. Okay, perfectionism. Now, perfectionism can show up at work as part of the mother wound, because if there hasn't been that attachment, if there hasn't been that nurturing relationship that you have with your mum, it means that may show up at work as perfectionism, because you're looking for others, you're looking for validation from the people at work to kind of meet that need that you didn't get from your mum. It might be driven also by fear of rejection as well, because you were rejected by your mum, which means there's going to be a fear, there's already going to be a vulnerability around being rejected by others. And so that means that, you know, it may show up at work as you thinking that you have to get everything right. You might be afraid that if you don't do something right, then they're going to say something to you about it. And that's going to be really hard for you to do. You don't want to feel that same rejection or shame that you may have felt from your mum. And so this is going to play out in your work. And so that's going to be very difficult. That's going to be really hard. That's going to be really, really hard to manage. But unless you're actually aware of what's going on, unless you're actually aware of how your mother wound plays out at work, you're not even going to really realize that that's what's happening. You're just going to be behaving in this certain type of way because you're so afraid of being rejected. That wound is still there, and it's festering. This is the thing that's really difficult about or what's important about doing the mother wound work, because unless you have that awareness around what's going on with your mother wound, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to be aware of how it's showing up in all the different areas of your life, because a lot of times we suppress a lot of the pain that we have around the mother wound, and then it just leaks out in different areas of your life. So it's important for you to do this work, and we will be talking about it in the study circle on Thursday. So if you're interested in joining us for that, you can click the link in my bio, go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. I also do one-to-one as well, so if you want to do something a bit more private to talk about your mother wound stuff, there's that offering as well, and you can find all the details at the same link. Okay, so yeah, perfectionism is can be driven by fear of rejection, like I said, as well, and also can be driven by shame as well, which is also very difficult. So if you're in that situation where you feel like everything has to be perfect, there's the fear, so you kind of you end up doing a lot more than what you should be doing at work because there is that fear, then I would consider if that's your mother wound really being acted out. Another way that it shows up is through you constantly want to be validated, and that's kind of linked to the perfectionism thing as well, where you're constantly wanting other people to validate who you are. Your sense of self, your self-worth, your confidence is built around how other people treat you. Hi, thanks for joining. It's built around how other people perceive you. They're built on how productive you are at work. If you're grinding, you're constantly grinding at work, thinking that you have to do more than everybody else in order for you to feel validated and accepted at work. And also to the detriment of yourself. If you're overworking and thinking that you have to do all of this in order to be validated at work, then again, it's worth questioning, what's underneath all of that. Is there a mother wound that is playing out there at work where you feel like, that you have to kind of put everything into it, because you have such low self-esteem and a low sense of self that your only value, your only sense of self-worth comes from when other people are telling you that everything's okay. All right, so have a think about that. Number 3, the third reason, and it's kind of linked to the other two that I've been talking about, is overgiving. You know, maybe you're overgiving. You might not be overgiving at work, but maybe you're overgiving, you know, in terms of your friends, in terms of maybe you're volunteering too much at work. You're volunteering to do too many things. I've had this conversation quite a few times, actually, especially I do some consulting at corporate companies, and I've seen this really show up in a lot of corporate companies with staff that are trying to be validated by, you know, other members of staff that are in positions of power, other white people that they work with, and, you know, it's showing up as, you know, that's kind of how internalized racism can show up. They don't feel worthy. They feel like they have to be do more at work and to feel like worthy of being in that position. Again, it could be internalized racism. It could be mother wound stuff also playing out as well, thinking that they have to be validated. And again, this whole thing around being on the grind and being more productive and feeling like they have to do more. They're constantly feeling like they have to do more because internally they don't feel worthy. Internally we don't feel worthy. Internally we feel that we have to do all of this stuff in order to feel validated, in order to feel like we matter, in order to feel like we deserve what deserve what we're doing at work, deserve what we're earning at work, all that stuff, you know. And it's really difficult. It's painful. It's painful to think about. It's painful to explore. But this stuff is really, really important because, you know, if you struggle at work, if you struggle to, you know, to do what you're supposed to do at work, if you struggle with feeling comfortable at work, being around other people, if you're struggling to receive praise at work, if you're struggling to ask for a raise at work, if you're struggling to set boundaries around work, you know, all of these things are all things that may be related to your mother wound and stuff that you're not really looking at. And it might be, again, like I said before, it might be going on at an unconscious level, so you might not really know that it's playing out until you actually start having these conversations with yourself. But it is really important. It is really, really important, you know. I did a trauma training thing yesterday. It's a course that I'm doing every period of 4 months. It's one session a month. And yesterday they were talking about, there was a section on trauma and shame, and you know, they were saying that shame actually starts early on in a child's life before the child can even speak. Shame can set in. So if a child is doesn't feel like the parent is paying them enough attention, or they're not getting their needs met, they're crying, they're not being, you know, all of that kind of stuff, that can actually trigger a shame response in babies. So before babies can even talk, you know, before children can even talk, you know, they can experience shame from the mother not responding to their needs as children, as young babies. And so if the shame in our lives starts that early, you know, you can imagine how, as you get older and as you become an adult, asking for your needs to get met in the workplace, you can see where the root can potentially come from, if you hear what I'm saying. So this is why it's important to explore what's happening with you in terms of the mother wound, and what's been the impact of your, you know, if you have a difficult relationship with your mother, how has that impacted how you show up at work, how you ask for things at work, and, you know, yeah, how you feel about yourself in terms of your worthiness and all of that. So this is where I come to number 4, which is the imposter syndrome. You know, a lot of times, you know, imposter syndrome means that we can feel like a fraud, that we can feel like we don't deserve anything. There's that secret horror that we're thinking, oh my God, people are going to really find out that I'm not who I say I am. You know, it's the sense of you not feeling worthy, a sense of you not feeling like you're deserving, a sense of feeling like you're kind of, that you're pretending, that you're not really the person that you say you are. And then there's a fear that you're going to get, that who you really are is going to be discovered, and that person who you think, that they think you are, is somebody that can't do the job, that is not good enough, that is not worthy of being in the position, the job that you're in. And so all of that as well can stem from a mother wound. It can stem from that lack of attachment. You know, there's that sense of, well, my mother or my parent wasn't able to love me. That parent wasn't able to embrace me. That parent wasn't able to protect me. That parent wasn't able to nurture me and champion me and stand up for me. Therefore, I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I don't deserve anything. And that those core beliefs that have been set up at an early age often mean that they get taken into the workplace, and you have the same thing going on at work. You don't feel like you're worthy of anything. You don't feel like that you just feel like a fake. You feel like you're having to put on a mask in order to show up at work, but internally there's a huge wound there. There's a huge wound there around your identity, around your self-esteem, around your confidence, and it's very, very difficult for you to show up and take up space in the workplace because of this wound. Okay, because of this wound, you don't have an identity, you don't have a sense of self. So, you just try and fit in at work. You try and do what the workplace expects of you. You try and fit into the workplace culture. Okay, you're doing all of these things, trying to fit in because you don't have that core sense of self. You don't have that core sense of identity and calmness and love for yourself. So you're constantly externalizing everything at the workplace. And because work is such a loaded conversation around it, it's going to tap into all your survival insecurities as well, because obviously you need to make money in order to pay your bills, in order to in order to live, you need to earn money. So if that person, or if the workplace is in that position of power, your workplace it has that much power, that you now understand that, well, I'm going to have to kind of abandon myself, just like you had to do as a parent. There's a parallel process going on here. As a child, you had to abandon yourself in order to stay in the relationship with the mother, with your mum, okay? Because your mum is going to be responsible for feeding you, breastfeeding you, looking after you, tending to your needs and all the rest of it. Okay, so there's an element of you having to discard your own needs in order to stay in that relationship so that your mum can look after you, put a roof over your head, all that kind of stuff. Okay, and then so if in the workplace that same process on one hand can get taken into the workplace, because then all of that stuff, that fear and insecurity around that power dynamic is then taken into the workplace. You then have to abandon yourself in the workplace in order to make sure that you keep your job, in order to make sure that you keep getting paid. So that parallel process of having to abandon yourself in order to survive becomes something, it becomes a default for you. And because you don't have your own sense of self, you've had to learn that that's the only way that you know how to survive. It's going to show up in your workplace in the same way. I hope that's making sense. I hope that's making sense. But you're going to have to show, you end up showing up in the workplace in the same sort of way, because that's all you know how to survive. Being yourself, being visible, taking up space with the mother, with your mum, was not allowed, was unsafe. Okay? So the same thing is going to happen when you're at work, unless you start to do the work and start to unpack what happened when you were, with the mother wound. Okay, what's happening around your mother wound? What happened to you as a child? And you have to go through that grieving process and start to reclaim and self-parent. Okay, hi Emily, thanks for joining. You have to reclaim that part of yourself. Okay, so that you can start to reparent and start to learn and understand what it means to look after yourself, so that you then have the confidence to set boundaries. Okay, that's number 5. The next one is your boundaries are going to be all over the place if you've got a mother wound, because you've been taught, again, like with your like I was saying before, that in order to stay in that relationship, you have to abandon yourself. You're not allowed to say no. Okay, you're not allowed to say no, which means you're going to have weak boundaries. Okay, you're going to have those weak boundaries, and that power dynamic means that it's going to get taken into the workplace as well. So you're not going to be able to say no at work. And I hear this a lot. There's a lot of people thinking that some of the clients that I work with, that are dealing with these issues, especially like I said with these corporate clients, there's a sense of fear around setting boundaries. Know that I'm not going to be the first one in and the last one out. Saying no to, when people leave, and then saying to people, oh, well, you're going to have to do this person's job now because they've left. And so they're asking you to take on more work, but they're not willing to compensate you for the extra work that you're doing. All of that kind of stuff. And really, not doing overtime, not overtime for free. There's this other thing that's come up as well in me working for corporate companies, is that, there's a lot of people of colour that are being asked to do all of this work around caretaking around other people, in terms, and that they're doing this under the guise of, looking after, doing their diversity stuff and all of that. And these big corporate companies will get people of colour to take on these roles as advocates for other people of colour. And there's it's a huge stress. They're not therapists, they're not really trained to do all of this, but because they want the company to progress, they've taken on these extra roles, and they're not paying them for it. So then what happens is these people that are advocating for other people of colour, they end up getting burnt out. Okay, they end up really, really stressed. And and then what happens is, then the corporate companies can then blame the people. They blame the person of colour that's taken on this role. Okay, and then they say, well, we tried it and it didn't work. They say we tried it and it didn't work, so we're not going to do it anymore. We're not going. And then they have an excuse then to reduce the amount of work that they're doing with people of colour, in terms of the diversity work that they need to do and all of that. And that's how, those are the kind of traps that a lot of people of colour get stuck in. A lot of black people get stuck in these situations. Hi, thanks for joining. They get stuck in these situations, trying to do the right thing, initially trying to do the right thing, but end up being trapped by the corporate company, and being used as a pawn by the corporate company, to trip themselves up, because it's just not sustainable. So what's important is for you to really think about these things and to have these boundaries in place. You've got to understand how the system operates. Okay, you've got to understand how the system operates and how we get caught up in these situations at work, and how they end up being detrimental to us and our well-being. And recognizing how that link between the mother wound, the survival thing, the trying to do the right thing, the caretaking, the overgiving, all of that kind of stuff, recognizing that is often driven by the mother wound. It's driven by the mother wound conversation, the mother wound, the fear of rejection, like I said before, the shame of being rejected or being abandoned by your own mother, and how this shows up in the workplace and you trying to do the right thing. So it is important for us to have boundaries. Okay, it's important for us to have boundaries at work, so that we can, and in terms of our relationship with our mother as well. So there is that link that we need to really be mindful about, around how we are abandoning ourselves, because the healing happens when we start to reclaim who we are. We first have to understand the dynamics of what's happening, and then we need to take the time to give ourselves permission to really think about, okay, well, what are my values? What are my personal values? What is really working for me? What do I really need in this situation? And how am I abandoning those values at work? And what do I need to do now to kind of realign myself to those things? Okay? What do I need to do now to realign myself with those things, with those values? What's important? The last thing that I'm going to share with you about how the mother wound shows up at work is this whole idea of not being able to, or feeling like you're not allowed to out-earn your mother. Okay, feeling like you're not allowed to out-earn. There's this thing of, well, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? And I've heard that a lot. From people, either they're self-employed or whatever. They've heard that in so many different ways from their mother. And then what that means at work, in your career, is that there's almost like a silent contract that's been made between you and your mother. It's not spoken, it's a silent contract, but there's this thing of, well, I'm not allowed to be, I'm not allowed to have a bigger career. It's not that you think that you're better than your mother, but you're not allowed to progress more than she does, because it's that fear of being visible, and because the mother then has so much power. The mother has so much emotional, psychological power, that you then feel that you always have to be, in order to get her approval, in order to keep your mum's approval, you feel like you have to keep small. So you're still stuck in that childlike place, Okay, within yourself, you're stuck within that childlike place within yourself because you feel like if you're any bigger, or if you're any more educated, or if you're healthier, or if you have more money, all of that kind of stuff, that there is going to be rejection. Okay, there's going to be rejection from the mother, or there's going to be rejection from work. If you ask for your needs to get met at work, if you ask for a pay rise at work, there's that fear that you're going to get rejected. So these two parts, they get enmeshed together. Because the core wound of being rejected, the core wound of being abandoned, the core wound of not feeling worthy, that core wound of the shame is still festering and playing up. And none of that stuff has been processed. None of that stuff has been spoken about. So it just stays there, often in the unconscious, because not a lot of us are aware of what's going on in terms of that. It stays in the unconscious, and it becomes very difficult for us to really be aware of what it is, but it's still playing out at work. It's still playing out, whether you're self-employed or whether you work for a corporate company, it's still playing out. You know, if you're self-employed, you may find it difficult to, to put your prices up. You know, you may find it difficult to, leave a group that you're in because you think that they might think, oh, well, you know, she thinks she's better than us now and all the rest of it. You know, but when you're growing and you're healing and you're changing, there's a constant state of evolution that needs to happen. Hi, Rose. Thanks for joining. There's a constant state of evolution that needs to happen. Okay, and when you're talking about the mother wound and you're talking about work, you have to explore the two as a dual process, because the two are going to be linked. The mother wound is going to impact how you feel about yourself. It's going to impact how you feel about your femininity. It's going to impact how you feel about your sense of worthiness. All of this stuff is going to play a role, and that is going to play out how you show up at work. So it's important to have that conversation. You know, I'm really excited about when we do read this chapter on Thursday in the group, so that we can really have a discussion about it and really think about, some of the stuff that she talks about, she talks about her mum chasing him with a knife. You know, she talks about her mum name calling. You know, there's colorism abuse that's going on in there as well. It's really tough. Really, really tough. She had a really, really hard time with her mum. But what I love about this book as well is she talked about, this other woman, the woman that came into her life and actually really showed up for her, and she was able to finally get some sort of sense of self-esteem and care for herself, because she was able to get that from somebody who took pity on her and was able to be compassionate to her and was able to really start to begin to to help her to see that things could be different. And that's what's important in the group work. That's what's important this is one of the reasons why group work is so powerful, actually, because it gives you an opportunity to begin to receive support and affirmation and love from other sisters that are doing the same work as you, that are in the same situation as you, that quite often have identical experiences, and there's that identification and self-compassion that can happen when there's shared experiences. That's why group work is really powerful. So if you're interested in joining us for the financial therapy study session on Thursday, you can click the link in my bio and go to heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. That's heal.juneallen.net. So that's it for today's session. So just quickly go through, just recap how the mother wound shows up at work. Number one is perfectionism. Okay, perfectionism. You feel like you have to do all of these things perfectly so that you don't get rejected, or you don't feel you don't get called out and go into the whole shame thing if you get it wrong. Okay. Number two is validation. Okay, when your worth is kind of wrapped up in the validation of others. Number three is overgiving. Okay, you're constantly overworking, volunteering, doing stuff for other people, to your own detriment. Okay, again, it's about the fear of rejection. Number four is imposter syndrome. You feel like a fraud. All right, you feel like a fraud. You don't have the identity or the self-esteem to be able to show up at work. So you don't feel like you're worthy of anything. Number five is having weak boundaries. You find it so difficult to say no. Okay, you find it very difficult to say no. So the power dynamic that you have with your mum and and feeling power, or the powerlessness you felt around the relationship with your mum as a child, is still being played out. Feeling powerlessness around the power dynamics at work. There's a dual process going on there. And the sixth and last one is feeling like you can't earn more, you can't progress further than your mum progressed. You can't earn more. There's that silent contract around earning more, being healthier, all of that kind of stuff that plays out. So think about it. If you feel like you really identify with this, then join us on Thursday for the circle. If you feel like you want to talk to me one-on-one on how to deal with this issue, then obviously you can work with me one-on-one with that as well. So yeah, so I hope you found that helpful. If you know anyone that that might benefit from anything that I've shared today, please share it with them. And I will see you next time. All right, thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time. All right, take care. Bye.